Welcome to the Speak by Design podcast, where we study personal style, message structure, and message strategy so you can become a consistently compelling force. Let's dig in. We are working on the skill of great writing today. And step one is enjoying writing at a higher level. So how much do you enjoy writing, and what would it take to make you enjoy it more? For me, what has helped me love writing is ChatGPT. And I'll share a couple of my favorite prompts. I like to offer an outline, and then I will even say, here's a transcript of me talking about this idea in free form. And you can record that in Zoom. You can record that so many different ways in Google Meets. Just grab a transcript of what the idea is. And then you can say, put my idea into this structure. So the structure might be the pyramid principle by Barbara Minto. And ChatGPT knows the pyramid principle. So then you can say, restructure this in the pyramid principle form, or restructure this in the hero's journey and tell it more like a story and make the consumer the hero. You have to tell it who the hero is. But when you do that, you'll get so many organized, interesting ideas for how to put your idea together, how to sequence it. You can then say, make sure to add some statistics, use sources like, and tell ChatGPT what sources you like. It has taken hours and hours out of the writing process. So that alone is more fun. The thing to enjoy that I don't think I understood until later in my career was that the outline is king. So for those of you who like to just start writing and then figure things out, I would say push yourself to every single time put the outline together. Now, why is this a senior leader communication skill? And why didn't we start with this? The reason we didn't start with this is it is not as persuasive. Written communication is never as persuasive as live face-to-face communication. But after you've come up with a great idea and you've delivered it to different audiences, it needs to be written down so that people can refer to it, so that people can forward that email or that memo or that PowerPoint. The written communication becomes the document that people live by. And it's something that can be spread to other audiences while you are sleeping. And if you are in a global organization, those written words are translated into different languages. The written word must be clear, so clear that there cannot be confusion. And sometimes that written word in prose versus in a PowerPoint is a better explanation tool. But bad writing can turn people off really fast. And within the first paragraph, the reader knows if this is worth their time. I notice how quickly I scan through articles in the Wall Street Journal. And if they don't grab me in paragraph 1, and I often check paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and then I look for a quote and a number. I wonder if you're the same. But notice how you read long articles. Do you really go sequentially, or do you jump around at first to see if it's worth your time before digging in? That's why that opening paragraph is so critical. But the outline comes first. So what I'm going to go through with you today are the best practices for writing, and then some examples of language and other prompts you can use in ChatGPT. Here are the 6 principles I want you to come away with from our discussion. The first one is the audience. Understand what the audience's goal is. What does the audience likely already know about this topic? What do they need to know to be convinced of something new? What is their pre-existing opinion? And what are their hopes and dreams, their wants from this topic? Now, if you don't know that about your audience, you should not start writing. Don't put your outline together until you understand where the audience is coming from and where you need to take them. The second principle is that no one wants to hear a summary of facts without insights. So obsess about the insights. What can we take away from the facts and the testimonies of people at the front line so that you're gathering really valuable insights? The third principle is at some point and rather soon in the article or the PowerPoint, you want to depart from what they already know. So what is the new information, the new path, the new insight, the new recommendation, the new decision, the new action? Okay, and it doesn't have to be all of those things. I would isolate it to truly one question. What is the new decision to consider? Or something like, what is the new action we need to take? And that is very important that that happens rather soon. Otherwise, the audience, the reader will say, I already know this. The fourth principle, don't think about the length. How long is this? How many words? And then you're looking at your word count all the time. Instead, focus on the insights. What are the new things that I can share with this audience that will convince them of the new decision or action to take? And it's the number of insights. Now, you might say, well, how many insights do I share? 10? 10 is probably too many. If you can get it to 3 or even 2 with sub insights underneath, that is a really strong argument. But once you get to 4 or 5, see if they can fit under some of your core assertions before you start offering too many that feel like they're tangents. If they're tangents in the writing, the reader's getting confused and distracted. They won't finish the whole article because now they want to go explore other things. They have new questions. The fifth item, the fifth principle is this concept of the language, the way you put the sentences together. And if you're not familiar with this term, it's called vigorous style. Look it up. This is something you can also prompt your ChatGPT to do. You can say, put this message in vigorous style or use vigorous language. That will help get rid of the passive voice. It will help get rid of unnecessary phrases like I think or we discovered, and it will pull those out and make it much easier to digest the message. And then the last principle is about writing being a process. It's very unlikely your first draft is going to be your best draft. It's always nice to pursue that and have that as a goal. And of course, the people who are reviewing your work like it when you try to make your first draft the best draft, but accept that other people are going to share ideas. And your writing style is your writing style, and everyone else has their writing style. And you might work for two different leaders or have two different audiences who have very different ideas of what good writing is. That is why it's always good to ask your leader, what are your pet peeves around writing? What do you consider to be good writing? Do you have an example of good writing, something good that you like? And even if you ask them to share a version of their own writing that they're proud of, that's very helpful too. We've coached a lot of people in communication departments who say, I have been a great writer my whole life. It is what I studied. It is what I have mastered, and I'm being told I'm not a good writer, and they're shocked. And I say, oh, please don't let this offend you. You're working with somebody with a different writing style. Find out how they define good, and then you offer up, I define good writing differently. Let me share what I like to do. Would you like me to adapt this? And they will then understand that there are many, they need to open up their minds that there are many good ways to write, and then you can open up your mind to say, they know this audience really well. I'm going to trust that they understand that the audience will respond best to this style of writing. And then when you have an opportunity to do something more creative, take that opportunity and try something new. And maybe you have to warn your leader that you are trying a new writing style out. One of the most difficult things is writing for other experts. And I imagine this happens to all of us, is someone says, "Oh, here's the message, here's my outline. Can you do the writing? Can you put this in a written email? Can you put this in a PowerPoint?" And if you don't know the concept really well and you don't know that person's writing style, it's nearly impossible to delight them, which is why it's great to do a few things. And this is using our 3S model, style, structure, strategy, but in reverse. And what you do is you first ask for an enormous amount of information about the reader and asking, where are they now and where do we need to take them? If we could do anything with their mind, what would we want them to think about? What would we want them to do after they read this? And in general, how do we want them to feel about the topic, the effort, and maybe even us, the writer of this document? And so when you have the answers to that, you can start immediately meeting the audience where they are, and you have ideas of what insights you need to share that would move them to the next degree of motivation or understanding on this topic. But then the next area is structure. And for structure, I offered the pyramid principle and the hero's journey. Those are structures that your AI know really well and are Googleable. I've come up with some others that I like really well for our blog. And you're welcome to take a look at some of our recent blogs that follow this structure. I love beginning with a dilemma, then going to the answer in a theme, then going to clearing the myth. Where are people confused about this? Where can we redefine the terms to make this simple and easy? And then good news on the topic, some bad news, a piece of data, a recent story on this. And it doesn't need to be my personal story. I like it better when it's somebody else's story. And then a picture of the future, and then ending with a call to action. And that sequence is a repeatable sequence on almost any topic. And why I like that is notice the highs and lows of that message. The dilemma, that's bad news. Answer, that's positive. So you're taking them out of the pain. The reader gets out of the pain and it's very simply stated, and it needs to be a novel idea, something they have not seen or heard before. Otherwise, they're not going to read any bit further. Then you've got to offer the confusion and remove the confusion. That's called clearing the myth. That's the third step. And in this, people don't even know they're confused often. And make sure that you are choosing a thing to clarify that is already a piece of confusion out there. And something that maybe they don't know yet, but then you might have to show how it's confusing and then clarify it. Other people are going to say, "Oh, thank you. I've been confused about that for years." They know they're confused, but some people don't know they're confused. Then the fourth area is the good news and the bad news. And always go to the good news because you've just clarified the confusion there. You've introduced the confusion and you've clarified it. And now they're feeling bad that, why didn't I understand this years ago? So now you share some good news. Like, good news is usually now we know and we have resources to work on this. And many people are motivated and going to benefit from it. Then the bad news is, but we haven't done it before, so there's no clear path. And then some data, and make this only needs to be one piece of data. Every now and then people put in so many pieces of data that it then creates more confusion. Now, if you have a data rich study and maybe 3 pieces of data could heavily make your argument, go ahead and use those 3, but not more than that. Because once you start introducing so many different numbers, that will slow down the reader, and the reader will have to spend time understanding why those numbers matter. Make sure it's very clear why those numbers matter. Then the story. So, this is where you can get the reader more emotional. And make sure it's a story that introduces struggle and confusion and how this plays out in a company or in a community, in the markets, in the global economy. Paint that story, one story. Now, sometimes you'll read articles where they have 2 pieces of evidence. You've got your data, you've got your story. I don't really caution yourself, how many stories do I need here? Because story overload, and think about in meetings when people tell too many stories, it weighs down the discussion. It feels like a lecture and it's no longer a dialogue. And the reader is dialoguing with you in their head as they're reading. Then the last section is the picture of the future with a call to action. This is where you go aspirational again and get expansive. See if you can say, I know you're thinking that this is for your organization, but think broader than that. It's also for your customers, it's for your competitors, it's for every country. It's lifting their heads to think more expansively on that and then giving them one bite-sized step that will help them make a decision and take an action on this. The call to action, depending on the type of document you're making, if you don't want to say the action to take, then leave that out because maybe this document is the precursor to a meeting where you're going to decide the decisions and actions. And then I would say you don't need that in there. That's one structure. If you know or that your organization has a preferred way of positioning messages, follow their structure. And the consistency of that sometimes makes it easier for your reader to make a decision. If you're always changing up your writing style and format and it's unexpected and surprising them, it may introduce confusion because it's not meeting their expectation of normally we write in pyramid form with the answer up front and a very clear headline, and every page has a headline that let's say it's PowerPoint, every page has a headline where it's a complete sentence, and now we're abandoning that format. I'm confused. We don't want our readers to be confused for a minute. We want them to be enthralled. So remind yourself and put yourself in that reader's position. What would make me so interested in every page? And caution yourself to say, do I have too much? That's usually what we have. The deeper expertise we have, the more research we have done, the easier it is to share way too much. The last thing I'm going to talk about on this topic is style. So, strategy is how do I meet my audience where they are? Structure, what's the right way to structure this message that will make it interesting to the reader? Then you look at style, and this is what can I do visually to make the audience interested? And if it is an article, there's not much you can do other than bolding and nice headline statements and maybe adding a degree of humor here and there. That could be interesting. And looking at the tone. What's the tone? Is it more serious? Is it more playful? And choosing language that will create that. Maybe using more rhetorical questions so that it is piquing their curiosity at every turn. That's style. But now, if it's a PowerPoint, you have a lot more freedom to do things with color and photography and quotes. You can be putting interesting dividers in there. You could have some animation. All of that is the style piece that is creating the feelings in the reading of this document. Now, people will say, well, you do mostly that when it's a live interaction. Yes, but you can still do some degree of that in a written document. So let me leave you with a few more ideas on the vigorous language. So here's an example of what I mean by that. Let's say the sentence was, the process was determined to need additional controls. Well, the process was determined. It's that was determined that is not active voice. So instead, changing it to the process requires additional controls is much easier to read and understand. Here's another example. We found that senior leaders prioritize integration over features in applications. We found. Do we need that we found? Senior leaders prioritize integration over features. That is much clearer. That's what we mean by vigorous style. And also reducing the number of words. If somebody says something like, let's spend significant time on, that's 4 words. You could constrain that to 2 words, focus on. So instead of spend significant time on, change that to focus on. And look for ways that if you're repeating the same word many times, that's a sign that you are being redundant or repetitive. That's an easy thing to scan for when you are editing yourself or other people. Now, when you give people feedback about their writing, which I know we're all doing, give feedback in the 3S structure. Tell them first about the audience and say, I read the document and I want to revisit where the audience is and where we need to get them to and what they care about and what they don't care about. That is very meaningful feedback because once the writer understands that, they can go back through and make a lot of edits just based on audience orientation. Second thing is look at the structure and say, I understand you put this top down. I want something more creative, or I want it to feel more like a story, and help them understand a structure that makes more sense for this document. The last thing you want to give people feedback on is font size, colors, indentation, inconsistencies in format, the vigorous style piece as well. Why? Because when you begin with that in your feedback, it takes people back to school and they think, oh, the person didn't even read my message. They're focusing on the little things. The good thing to remind the writer, though, is when you see too many of those errors, it often makes the person think you didn't spend time. You didn't review your own work first. So make sure you do review your own work first before you turn in things. And be kind when you're giving feedback to writers. They have likely spent a lot of time on this. They have many questions and they want gentle feedback. And it hurts to have their hard work criticized to the nth degree. Start with strategy, then structure, then style. All right, so what to take away from this is I hope that you apply those 6 principles more the next time you write. Always begin with the outline, and that you give very constructive feedback to people who are writing for you. And you will have better written communications around you, which helps you get that momentum and traction on your larger efforts. All right, enjoy your writing just a degree more. Take care, everybody. If you are enjoying all of these lessons, but now you're hungering to turn all of this into skills and habits that make this work intuitive and natural so that you don't have to think about it, then you want to join Speak by Design University. That's our coaching program that gives you private coaching, group coaching with me, group training, self-paced learning, as well as exceptional networking with other people like you. This program is for managers and above, people whose careers are on fire and they're looking to hit their next level, and they want to do that sooner rather than later. Check it out at speakbydesign.com/join. That's speakbydesign.com/join, and you can start with us at the 1st of next month. We hope to see you there.